You feel it sometimes. A faint restlessness, as if life is quietly slipping past you while you're busy making other plans. Not a crisis, not a tragedy, just a sense that you've been standing in the river too long, watching the water flow, forgetting you could step in. We convince ourselves we have time. Time to pursue the dream. Time to fix the relationship. Time to finally be the person we promised ourselves we would be. But what if that time never comes? This is not a sermon. It's not a motivational speech. It's a mirror, held up to the ways we let our days evaporate without even noticing. What follows is an invitation, not to live recklessly, but to live awake, to stop wasting the only thing you can never earn back, your life. The silent clock. You don't hear the clock until it's almost too late. It ticks quietly in the background while you scroll, while you answer emails, while you tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. But it's there, every second slipping through your fingers, carrying away a piece of your life you will never see again. Seneca once wrote that it's not that life is short, but that we waste much of it. It's a strange accusation, isn't it? We don't think of ourselves as wasting life. We think we're just living it. But what if most of what we call living is really just a slow, polite surrender to distraction? We all know the feeling. You open your phone for a quick check, and suddenly an hour has passed. You sit in a meeting that could have been an email, and another hour is gone. You binge one more episode, scroll through one more page, say yes to one more thing you didn't really want to do. Life doesn't leave in great chunks. It drips away. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, constant leak. Time is the only currency that cannot be replenished. You can lose money and make it back. You can lose possessions and replace them. But time? Every moment you spend is gone forever. We are all millionaires of minutes when we are young, but we spend recklessly, as though the supply is endless. Only later, when the account runs low, do we start counting the coins. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us have no idea what we're actually spending our time on. We think we're busy. We think we're working hard. But busy with what? Hard at what? Seneca warned against confusing activity with purpose. A man can work tirelessly his whole life and still have achieved nothing of value. If all his work was for someone else's goals, someone else's definition of success. We live in a time where distraction is a business model. Entire industries are designed to keep your eyes, your thoughts, your hours locked in their grasp. They know something many of us forget. Attention is life. Where your attention goes, your life follows. And yet, we give it away for free. When I was younger, I thought of time as something I could store, like coins in a jar. If I worked hard now, I could save up life for later. But life doesn't work that way. You don't store minutes. You don't keep them on a shelf. You either spend them or you lose them. It's worth asking yourself, if a stranger followed you around with a stopwatch, tracking where your hours go, would you be proud of the record at the end of the day? Or would it look like a museum of missed intentions? The problem is not that we run out of time. The problem is that we live as if it's abundant, as if the clock will wait until we're ready. But the clock is indifferent. It doesn't care if you're tired or scared or distracted. It will keep ticking, and one day it will stop. For you. We need to learn to hear it now, before the last seconds drown it out. Because the silent clock is not your enemy. It's your reminder. It's there to say, this is your life. Spend it like it matters. And yet, even if we hear the ticking, we often tell ourselves the same comforting lie, that there will be a better time to start living someday. The mirage of someday. We all carry a private calendar in our minds. On it, there is a date circled in red, the day when we will finally start living. It's not on this month's page, or even the next. It's somewhere in the hazy future, a place we call someday. Someday, I'll travel. Someday, I'll write the book. Someday, I'll leave this job. We treat someday like a patient friend, waiting quietly for us to arrive. But the truth is far crueler. Someday is a mirage in the desert. You walk toward it your whole life, only to discover it never existed at all. Epicurus once warned that the greatest obstacle to living is expectation, the habit of hanging life on the hope of a future that may never come. And Nietzsche would ask his haunting question: if you had to live this exact day over and over for eternity, would you be proud of it? For most of us, the answer is no. But instead of changing the day, we comfort ourselves with the idea that this is temporary. We're just in a holding pattern, we say. Life will begin later. We forget that later is not guaranteed. I remember meeting a man in his 60s who had worked the same job for 40 years, a job he didn't love, but endured because it was safe. His plan was to retire early and travel the world with his wife. They had a list, 37 places they would see together. But 2 months before his retirement date, she died suddenly. They had never visited even one. That is the price of someday. In our culture, we worship deferred happiness. We glorify the grind now for the reward later. We save our best clothes for special occasions, our most loving words for the perfect moment, our truest dreams for a time when things settle down. But life does not settle. Life is a river. You either step into it now, or you watch it pass until it's gone. This doesn't mean you quit your job tomorrow or throw away your responsibilities. It means you stop imagining that happiness must wait for a certain set of conditions to be met. It means you fold joy into the days you already have. It means you stop postponing the phone call, the kiss, the song, the walk, the sunset, because these small acts are the life you've been putting off. The mirage of someday keeps us obedient. It keeps us from noticing that our real life is slipping away while we stare into the distance. But when you let go of someday, you begin to live today. Ask yourself, if this was the only week you had left, how much of it would you spend doing what you're doing now? Because the clock is ticking, and later is not a date on the calendar. It's a ghost. Comfort as a cage. Comfort has a soft voice. It tells you you're fine where you are. It says there's no rush, no need to risk, no reason to change. And because its tone is gentle, you don't notice the chains it slips around your life. We like to think of danger as something loud and obvious. Storms, accidents, disasters. But comfort is a quieter danger. It doesn't break in and steal your life. It lulls you into handing it over. Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia, a life of flourishing, the highest human good. But flourishing requires growth, and growth is born of challenge. Camus wrote that the struggle itself, even against absurd odds, is what gives life its texture. Comfort, on the other hand, seeks to erase struggle altogether. In doing so, it also erases the very conditions in which a full life is forged. Think of the countless people who stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, cities that stifle them, because it's easier than facing the unknown. The paychecks arrive on time, the routines are predictable, and nothing is asked of them that stretches their soul. Slowly, the cage grows invisible. Comfort is not inherently bad. It keeps us warm in winter, fed when we're hungry, safe when we're threatened. But left unchecked, it becomes an addiction. We start measuring life not by its richness or depth, but by the absence of discomfort. And so the range of what we can endure shrinks until even small challenges feel overwhelming. I once spoke to a man who had turned down a dream opportunity to work abroad because he wasn't ready to leave his apartment, his gym, his favorite coffee shop. Years later, he admitted he couldn't even remember why he thought those things mattered so much. All he remembered was the regret. The truth is, nothing new is born inside the borders of comfort. Your most defining moments will almost always come with some degree of fear. Your voice shaking as you speak up, your legs trembling as you take a leap, your hands uncertain as you start the thing you're not sure you can finish. But here's the paradox. The more often you leave your comfort zone, the bigger it becomes. Every time you step into the unknown, you carry a piece of that unknown back with you, and it becomes part of your new normal. That's how growth works. It expands the territory in which you can feel at home. The cage of comfort will never open itself. It will never invite you out. You have to walk to the edge and push the door yourself, knowing full well that the air outside will be colder, the terrain unfamiliar. But that is where the real story begins. So ask yourself, are you comfortable or are you alive? Because the two are not the same. And sometimes we try to break free from comfort by filling our lives with constant activity, only to find ourselves trapped in another illusion, the myth of busyness. The myth of busyness. We wear busyness like a badge of honor. How have you been? Oh, busy. It's meant to sound like proof of importance, a subtle way of saying, I matter, because my time is in demand. But busyness is not the same as a life well lived. A calendar full of obligations can still belong to an empty soul. Thoreau warned that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. He wasn't talking about people who did nothing. He meant people who did everything except what mattered. Marcus Aurelius wrote that our actions should be aligned with our highest values. Yet, many of us move through our days like a wind-up toy, churning out activity without a moment to ask, why this? Why now? Why at all? Modern life makes it dangerously easy to confuse motion with progress. We reply to dozens of emails, attend countless meetings, cross tasks off our lists, and yet, when the day ends, we can't point to a single thing that brought us closer to the life we want. I remember sitting in an airport lounge once, overhearing two executives talk about their schedules. They compared flights, conference calls, and back-to-back meetings, like athletes comparing trophies. I couldn't help but think, they're proud of the weight that's crushing them. Busyness can be a disguise for fear. If you stay in constant motion, you never have to sit quietly and face the uncomfortable questions. Am I happy? Am I proud of this life? Am I spending my time well? Silence can feel threatening when you're afraid of the answers. The truth is, you don't need to be busy to be valuable. Some of the most important moments in life happen in stillness, in a deep conversation, a slow walk, an unhurried hour spent creating something you love. But stillness has no bragging rights in our culture. No one asks, so, how many hours did you spend being present this week? If busyness were proof of meaning, the most overworked people would also be the most fulfilled. But ask them, and you'll often find exhaustion, resentment, and a quiet sense that life is slipping past while they're stuck answering messages and ticking boxes. The point is not to do nothing. It's to do the right things, deliberately, without letting the noise swallow the signal. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine you were only allowed to do 3 things today. Which 3 would you choose? Now ask yourself, how much of your actual day is spent on things that wouldn't even make that list? Because the danger of busyness is not just burnout, it's blindness. You can be so busy running that you never notice you're on the wrong road. And the road you're on is often determined by something you rarely question: the company you keep. You don't just live your own life, you live in the echo of the lives around you. The voices you hear most often, the attitudes you absorb without realizing, the habits you witness every day. They seep into you quietly, like dye into cloth. Socrates believed that virtue could be cultivated through conversation, that the quality of our dialogue shapes the quality of our mind. Emerson said that friendship was a kind of mirror. In our friends, we see both who we are and who we might become. And yet, we rarely stop to examine the mirrors we're looking into. Think about it. How many of your opinions, dreams, or even doubts truly began with you? How much of what you think is possible for your life has been defined by the people you spend the most time with? In the modern world, company isn't just the people in your living room or office. It's the group chats, the podcasts, the social media feeds you scroll through in bed. You might be alone in your house, but you're still in a crowded room of influences, voices tugging at your attention and telling you what to value. Some people lift you without even trying. Being around them makes you braver, kinder, sharper. They speak about possibilities as if they're within reach, and in their presence, they often are. Others drain you, leaving you heavier than you were before. They speak in limits, in cynicism, in quiet discouragements, disguised as realism. The tricky thing is, the drainers don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they're people you love, who mean well, but whose own fears and disappointments wrap around your ambitions like vines around a young tree. Left too long, those vines will shape your growth or stop it entirely. I knew a woman who wanted to start her own business, but every time she mentioned it to her circle of friends, they'd remind her of the risks, the failures they'd heard about, the comfort of a steady paycheck. They weren't malicious. They thought they were protecting her. But 10 years later, she was still in the same job, telling herself the same story, surrounded by the same people who had convinced her to wait. This isn't about cutting everyone out the moment they disagree with you. It's about noticing the balance. Are you mostly surrounded by people who make you forget your limitations, or people who remind you of them? The truth is, you can't completely control the influences in your life, but you can choose which ones you feed. You can choose to spend more time with the voices that call you forward, and less with the ones that keep you in place. Because in the end, you don't just become what you think. You become what the people around you make you think is possible. And yet, even if you choose your company well, there is still a trap that can steal your joy. The habit of measuring your life against someone else's. The prison of comparison. Comparison begins as a glance and ends as a shackle. You look at someone else's life, a house, a body, a career, a relationship, and somewhere inside you, a voice whispers, "Why not me?" At first it feels harmless, but if you feed that voice, it grows until it turns every joy into a measuring stick, and every success into a competition you never agreed to enter. Montaigne wrote that, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. Yet when you're trapped in comparison, you no longer belong to yourself. You live in the shadow of other people's timelines, successes, and choices. You shape your own decisions, not from desire, but from a need to keep up. In the modern world, comparison has a new stage, the endless scroll. It's a curated museum of other people's highlights, carefully lit and framed. You see the engagement announcement without the years of loneliness before it. You see the vacation without the debt. You see the smiling faces without the nights they cried alone. Social media doesn't just show you what's possible. It convinces you that it's normal. The danger is subtle. It's not only about envy. It's about losing sight of your own path entirely. You can spend so much time watching the road next to you that you forget to move forward on your own. It's like trying to run a race while staring sideways. You stumble, you slow down, you drift. I knew a man who wanted to be a teacher, but he spent years watching friends climb corporate ladders, buy luxury cars, and post photos of lavish vacations. Slowly, he convinced himself that his dream was too small, that he should chase what they were chasing. By the time he realized the life he was building wasn't his own, he'd already traded away a decade to someone else's definition of success. There's a freedom that comes when you realize you can opt out of the race entirely. You don't have to win at their game. You can build your own scorecard, one that no one else sees, one that measures the things that matter to you: peace, integrity, joy, depth. Here's the truth. Someone will always have more. More money, more beauty, more followers, more recognition. If you base your worth on that scale, you will always be losing. But no one else can live your exact life. No one else can tell your story the way you can. A flower doesn't bloom faster by watching the one next to it. And neither will you. Your growth comes from turning toward the sun that's meant for you, and only you. But to follow your own path, you must make choices, and making them takes courage. The courage to choose every yes is 100 silent no's. Every door you walk through means there are others you will never open. Choice is not simply about what you embrace, it's about what you leave behind. And that is why so many people avoid it altogether. Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, that no matter how much we wish to avoid responsibility, our lives are shaped by the choices we make, and just as often, by the choices we avoid. Every moment is a crossroads, and the burden of freedom is that you cannot stand at the intersection forever. Yet, how often do we try? We linger in relationships long after we know they've ended in spirit. We stay in jobs that drain us because leaving feels like leaping without a net. We keep our dreams in the someday file because starting means committing, and commitment means closing off other possibilities. But indecision is not a neutral space. It is not a harmless waiting room. It is a slow leak in the soul. While you hesitate, life moves on. While you weigh every option for the perfect choice, time makes the choice for you by taking the opportunity away. I once met a man who had been offered a partnership in a small but promising company. He told himself he needed just a little more time to think it through, to weigh the risks. Months passed. The company took off without him. When I asked what held him back, he said, "I kept waiting to feel certain." But certainty is a rare guest. Waiting for it is like waiting for the wind to stop before you set sail. You'll never leave the harbor. The courage to choose doesn't come from knowing the outcome. It comes from accepting that you can live with the risk. Aristotle said that virtue is a habit, And courage is no exception. The more often you step forward without guarantees, the stronger your decision-making muscle becomes. The truth is, saying yes to one path doesn't just shape your life, it shapes you. Every choice is an act of self-definition. When you choose, you are telling the world, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. And yes, sometimes you will choose wrong. But a wrong choice, corrected, will still move you farther than no choice at all. If you don't choose, the world will choose for you, and you may not like where it leads. So ask yourself, what is the decision you've been circling without making? What is the yes you've been afraid to give? Or the no you've been afraid to speak? Make it. Today. Before the silence decides for you. And once you choose your path, there's another challenge. Actually being present for it. The art of presence. You can be here without being here. Your body sits in a room while your mind runs ahead to tomorrow's meeting, last week's argument, or 1,000 invisible conversations you will never have. Life is happening in front of you, but you're living somewhere else entirely. Marcus Aurelius, in his private meditations, reminded himself to return to the present moment again and again. Confine yourself to the present. Zen teachings echo the same truth. The only place life can be touched is in the now. And yet, the now is often the hardest place to stay. We live in a culture of split attention. Multitasking is treated as a skill to master, when in reality it's a slow erosion of depth. You watch a movie while checking your phone, eat dinner while answering emails, take a walk while rehearsing what you'll say in the next meeting. Each moment becomes background noise to something else. The danger is that life begins to blur. The details fade. You remember events not by how they felt, but by the photos you took while half distracted. The meal was good, you think, but you were scrolling. The sunset was beautiful, but you were framing it for Instagram. You didn't live the moment. You documented it for later. Presence is not passive. It's an act of discipline. It requires resisting the mind's constant pull toward the elsewhere. It means looking at someone and really seeing them, not just nodding while you think about what you'll say next. It means tasting your food instead of inhaling it between notifications. It means hearing the sound of rain without rushing to fill the silence. I once sat with an elderly man on a park bench. He had lost most of his sight, but he told me he could still see in other ways. The warmth of sunlight on his face, the weight of air before a storm, the rhythm of footsteps passing by. If you pay attention, he said, there's more to the present than you think. Presence turns the ordinary into something luminous. A quiet cup of coffee in the morning becomes a small ceremony. A conversation becomes a rare exchange rather than a transaction of words. Even moments of pain gain clarity when you allow yourself to feel them fully without trying to outrun them. The paradox is that by rooting yourself in the present, you don't lose time. You expand it. Hours feel longer when you inhabit them completely. Years feel fuller when they're made of moments you actually lived. Because the truth is, you will never find meaning later. You can only make it now. And making it now also means knowing when to stop chasing and realizing you already have enough. The measure of enough more is the whisper that never stops. It tells you one more dollar will finally make you feel secure. One more achievement will finally make you feel worthy. One more purchase will finally make you feel satisfied. But here's the problem. More has no finish line. Epicurus warned that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Lao Tzu went further. He who knows that enough is enough will always have enough. Yet in the modern world, we treat contentment as a sign of laziness, and wanting more as proof of ambition. We are surrounded by the machinery of discontent. Advertisements are not designed to sell products. They're designed to sell dissatisfaction. They remind you, in subtle and not so subtle ways, of what you don't yet have, and then they offer the cure. But the cure is temporary, and the hunger returns. It's not only about money or possessions. It's about the endless appetite for recognition, status, validation. We check the likes on a post, feel a brief spark of satisfaction, and then crave the next one. It's a treadmill that moves faster the longer we run. The danger is not just exhaustion, it's blindness. When you chase more without stopping to define what enough looks like for you, you let the world decide it for you. And the world will always raise the bar higher than you can reach. I once knew a man who doubled his income in 5 years. He upgraded his home, his car, his vacations, but he also upgraded his expectations. The things that once felt like luxuries became the baseline, and he was no happier than before. Just busier, more stressed, and somehow still convinced that the next level would fix it. Enough is not a number. It's a decision. It's the quiet recognition that this meal is good, this roof is shelter, this moment is sufficient. It doesn't mean you stop dreaming or striving. It means you stop chasing the mirage that more will complete you. The irony is that when you decide what's enough, you often end up with more. Not in possessions, but in freedom. You reclaim hours once spent earning for the sake of earning. You reclaim peace once traded for anxiety. You reclaim joy in the smallest pleasures because they no longer compete with an imagined better. If you can't be content with what you have now, more will not change that. If your cup has no bottom, it will never be full. And nothing sharpens our sense of enough like remembering that one day, all of it will end. Death as a teacher. We live as though death is a distant rumor, something that happens to other people, in another place, at another time. We push it to the edges of our thoughts, cover it with noise, pretend it won't come knocking on our own door. But death is not a rumor. It's the most certain thing about us. The Stoics had a phrase, memento mori, remember you must die. It wasn't meant to depress, but to awaken. When Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of death, it wasn't to make life darker, but sharper. Death is the frame that gives shape to the picture. Without it, our days would have no edges, no urgency, no reason to choose. Heidegger called it being toward death, the idea that our awareness of mortality should guide how we live, not haunt us. Yet in our culture, we avoid the conversation entirely. We celebrate youth as if it's the only state worth having, and we treat aging like a failure of will. We spend billions to hide the signs of passing time, but not nearly enough to make the passing time worth living. I once sat with a man in hospice care who told me he didn't fear dying. What he feared was looking back and realizing he had only existed. I was always getting ready to live, he said, and then I ran out of time. That is the great gift and the great cruelty of death as a teacher. It reminds us that life is not an endless rehearsal. The people you love will not be here forever. The chances you're hesitating on will not wait. The version of yourself you keep promising to become someday may never get the chance. When you keep death close in your mind, it has a way of stripping away the trivial. Petty grudges fade. Status games seem laughable. You stop hoarding your kindness. You say the words you've been saving. You give yourself permission to try things you're not ready for, because ready is a luxury of those who think they have forever. There's a strange thing that happens when you really face mortality. You don't become more afraid. You become more alive. The sunset looks different when you know you have a finite number of them left. The sound of your child's laughter, the weight of a loved one's hand in yours, the smell of the earth after rain, all of it becomes brighter, more urgent, more real. We cannot negotiate with death, but we can let it teach us the one lesson it has been offering since the first human drew breath. You do not have time to waste. Every morning you wake up is borrowed, and borrowed things should be spent like they're rare. And if every morning is borrowed, the only way to honor it is to live deliberately. Living deliberately, life will happen to you if you let it. Days will pass in the quiet hum of routine, decisions made by habit or by someone else's expectations. And before you know it, you'll look back and realize you didn't so much live your life as you drifted through it. Thoreau walked into the woods with a mission: to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. For him, this meant stripping away distractions and illusions, leaving only what was real and necessary. Marcus Aurelius echoed the same call when he wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, meaning that what you allow into your mind and what you choose to focus on will shape the life you create. Living deliberately begins with awareness. Most of us think we are choosing our lives, but in reality, we are reacting. Reacting to emails, to trends, to the needs and demands of others. To live deliberately is to shift from reaction to creation. It's to ask, every day, is this how I want my hours to be spent? Is this the kind of person I want to be becoming? It means setting boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. It means saying no to things that drain you, even if they make sense on paper. It means being ruthless with what you allow into your mental space. I once knew a man who worked 12-hour days, telling himself he was doing it for the family. But when he finally slowed down enough to look at his life, he realized he was building a future version of himself he didn't even want to meet. He had never stopped to ask the question, to what end? Deliberate living doesn't require a cabin in the woods. It requires that you see your days as material for something you are building. You treat them like a craftsman treats wood, selecting each piece with care, cutting away what doesn't fit, and sanding until the shape is true to the vision. And the vision matters. Without it, you're just reacting to the shape of whatever comes. With it, you have a compass. You can make choices not just for comfort or convenience, but for alignment with something larger. Your values, your principles, your deepest sense of what life is for. If your life were a book, would you read it? Would you underline sentences? Would you recommend it to someone you love? Or would you quietly close the cover, knowing the plot never really went anywhere? Living deliberately means making sure the story is worth telling, not because it's glamorous or impressive to others, but because it's true to you. And the surest way to test if your story is worth telling is to imagine you're living its final page. The last day test. Imagine waking up tomorrow and knowing, with absolute certainty, that this is your last day. Not in a vague, poetic sense, but literally. The sun will set, and you will not see it rise again. What would you do? Who would you call? What would suddenly become irrelevant? The last day test is not a morbid fantasy. It is a compass. The Stoics used it. The existentialists used it. And countless ordinary people have stumbled upon it in moments of crisis. It cuts through noise and indecision like nothing else, because it forces you to weigh every action against the question, would this matter if I only had today? On your last day, you wouldn't waste time polishing your image or chasing approval from strangers. You wouldn't scroll past hours of other people's lives. You wouldn't say yes out of politeness to things that don't feed your soul. You would, most likely, turn toward the people you love. You would want to see their faces, hear their voices, leave them with words you had been holding back. You might finally start something you had been too afraid to try, or you might simply sit quietly, letting the weight of the moment wash over you. I once met a woman who had been diagnosed with a serious illness. Her prognosis was uncertain, but her sense of clarity was not. She said, I stopped making to-do lists. I started making want-to-do lists. The difference was subtle but profound. One was about obligation, the other was about essence. The last day test doesn't mean you quit your job, abandon all plans, or live recklessly. It means you live selectively. You bring urgency to the things that matter, and you let the rest fall away. You make sure that if the curtain fell tonight, you wouldn't feel you had rehearsed your whole life and never stepped on stage. One day, this won't be a thought experiment. One day, it will be your last sunrise. The tragedy is not that day itself. It is the possibility of reaching it and realizing you lived in hesitation, distraction, and deferral. So use the test now. Let it shape the choices you make today. Because if you pass it today, and tomorrow, and the next day, then whenever your final day arrives, you will not meet it with regret, but with recognition. You will look at the life you've lived and think, yes, that was mine, and I spent it well. One day, the clock will stop for you, not because you ran out of dreams, but because you ran out of days. Between now and then is all you have. Fill it with things worth remembering. Fill it with people worth loving. Fill it with choices worth owning. And when your last day comes, you will not meet it with fear. You will meet it with recognition. Yes, you will say, that was mine, and I spent it well.